Galactic Edge, The Black Hole Exodus. Episode 3. Diagnosis. The enthusiasm in the command center gradually subsided. The crew slowly returned to the ship's engines. It wasn't long before an eerie silence pervaded the bridge. Only the tapping of fingers on ship's displays and keyboards could be heard. Even the computer was suspiciously quiet. Upon a direct query about the starship's location, it remained unresponsive for long seconds. "I have no records in my memory for this region of space," its always pleasant voice with alto tones finally declared. However, this time, it reassured no one. "Leno, run a diagnostic on the memory modules," I ordered, watching with satisfaction as the young woman with short black hair, along with two other technicians, swiftly removed a panel covering the electronic circuits, searching diligently for a possible fault in the main brain of the ship. Even machines have their weak moments, I thought, hoping that our main computer had chosen this time for such a lapse. My mind drifted back to an incident 10 years ago in the labs of Future Tech, which had catapulted Leno among the elite scientists. And, after all, it was why she was part of this crew. At Future Tech, they had designed a computer capable of executing complex calculations and analyses with perfect precision. Over time, its developers and users became convinced that perfection never erred. The computer was employed in scientific research, medical diagnostics, and even in developing security systems. One day, perfection was tasked with calculating the trajectory of a newly discovered asteroid heading close to Earth. The results it provided indicated that the asteroid was on a collision course with the planet, expected to impact in a few months. The world was plunged into panic. Preparations to avert the potential disaster were initiated. However, upon reviewing the data, Leno, then a junior engineer, accidentally discovered an irregularity in the algorithm used by perfection. It turned out that the computer had failed to consider a small but critical anomaly in the gravitational field of the solar system. This mistake was caused by a recent software update meant to improve computational efficiency, which inadvertently led perfection to overlook a crucial factor in the equation. After correcting the error, perfection recalculated. The new results showed that the asteroid would miss Earth, posing no collision risk. The world breathed a sigh of relief, but the incident left deep questions about the reliability and infallibility of artificial intelligence. My thoughts returned to the bridge of the Solaris Seeker. I earnestly hope that our onboard artificial intelligence also makes mistakes. I turned away from the darkened navigation panel. Leno was still engrossed in scanning the ship's systems, not looking like she was ready to give up this pursuit. "How does it look?" I asked. "The diagnostics will take a few more hours. So far, we haven't found any anomalies in the calculations," she replied. "Perfect," I said, with a hint of irony. "Diana, you have command," I shouted towards the tall woman with a lush mane of red hair. Receiving her affirmative response, I let the turbo elevator whisk me away to the infirmary, to Aiden. After him, I was the highest-ranking officer aboard. Under normal circumstances, the ship's first officer would assume command. But since the accident, he was nowhere to be found. Ship's logs showed he had been on Deck 3, the very deck that had suffered a violent decompression several days earlier. His body was likely adrift in the chilling expanse of space by now. The infirmary on the Solaris Seeker was quiet and somber, lit only by the glow of several monitors and devices connected to the bed where Captain Aiden lay. The walls, smooth and silver, with a light metallic sheen, reflected the light from the displays, creating an almost surreal illumination. The air hummed softly with the steady beeping of hidden machines, tirelessly monitoring Aiden's vital signs. Captain Aiden lay motionless, his face pale, surrounded by a tangle of thin, transparent tubes and electrodes attached to his body. One tube, jarringly out of place, protruded from his mouth, aiding his breathing, while other sensors monitored his heartbeat, blood oxygen levels, and brain activity. The air in the room was cool and sterile. Occasionally, it was sliced by the rustling of a passing robot, checking on the captain's vitals or adjusting one of the machines. Beside his bed was a small table with a few of Captain Aiden's personal items, including a photograph of his family and a small model of the ship where he had spent most of his life. In this sterile, technology-laden environment, they seemed oddly out of place. "Aiden," I exhaled. "Aiden, can you hear me?" I asked as I approached his bed. He didn't respond. "He cannot hear you," the attending robot informed me, turning towards me with programmed courtesy. "Captain Aiden suffers from similar medical issues as many other crew members. The ship's movement through the gravitational anomaly caused severe internal organ damage, including brain trauma, in several dozen individuals," the machine stated, as if anticipating my next question. "I have already begun necessary scans of the entire crew. Fortunately, most are in good condition. Rebecca and her team have managed to treat some cases on the spot," the robot added. I hadn't realized the ship's robot had such tools and permissions at its disposal. "When time allows, I must speak with Rebecca. And I also need to herd the entire crew for a complete medical examination." I sensed that many wouldn't like it. Doctors weren't particularly beloved here. Any minor health issue that modern technology couldn't fix meant the end of working on a spaceship. Though, honestly, at this point, we needed anyone who could hold a control panel and had a sharp mind. "When will Captain Aiden be fit for duty?" I asked the robot, already busy again around the commanding officer. "It's hard to say. I recommend placing the captain in a hibernation chamber. His injuries are so severe that, at present, we can only halt their progression. Healing him with the ship's current equipment is impossible," the machine stated and turned to me again, as if expecting me to advise how to bring the captain back to life. This was not what I wanted to hear. A buzzing filled my ears. The last thing I remember was a robotic arm catching me around the waist, softening the impact as my body hit the floor. When I regained consciousness, the room still looked the same. I was lying on a bed in the center, with Rebecca leaning over me. "Nova, Nova, can you hear me?" her pleasant, melodic voice echoed from afar. I squeezed her hand and tried to sit up. She immediately pushed me back down. My second attempt was more successful. I sat up firmly, resisting Rebecca's pleas to lie back down. Soon enough, I stood on unsteady legs beside the bed. Then, I walked across the room, feeling much better. Rebecca's face was no longer as frightened as it was when I first tried to sit up. She wore a mask of resignation, as if to say she could bend over backward caring for patients, but no one would appreciate it. "I need to get back to the bridge," I declared resolutely as she approached me with another attempt to get me back on the bed. "All right," she said resignedly and clipped a tiny display to my neck. "This buddy will keep an eye on you. If you faint again, I can quickly locate you on the bridge and perhaps even bring you back to consciousness with a strong pulse," she added with a dose of satisfaction. Then she couldn't help herself and slapped my buttocks. "If we weren't in such a mess as we are now, I'd tie you to the bed and dope you up so much that you wouldn't get up for a week," she added and laughed relievedly. Her blonde hair waved slightly and fell into her forehead. "Stop it and just give me my clothes," I smiled at her and threw off the blue cloak I was covered with while on the medical bed. She liked what she saw. She made no effort to hide the hungry look that eagerly scanned my breasts. I quickly slipped into the silver-black jumpsuit brought by the tentacled robot and disappeared down the corridor with a short wave. "Phew, that's done." I called for the turbo elevator. "To the bridge," I commanded. The elevator jerked sharply into motion. Suddenly, there was a deafening bang, and the turbolift came to an abrupt halt. I fell to the ground, hitting my head hard. "Are you okay?" a voice came from beneath me. On the floor, the tiny display blinked, projecting Rebecca's hologram. perfectly fine. But the same can't be said for the turbo elevator. I responded and requested a technical team through the personal intercom. What was that noise? I asked Rebecca's hologram. But instead of replying, her image vanished. I couldn't reconnect with the infirmary. Nothing works on this ship, flashed through my mind. The elevator responded to no command. The normally glowing, colorful control panel with touch screens went dark. To top it off, my personal intercom went silent, likely damaged in the fall. The cramped interior of the elevator, typical for most space vessels, induced a mild sense of claustrophobia. Smooth, matte-finished metal walls, resistant to damage, offered little in the way of handholds for climbing upward to pry open the upper panel behind which lay the elevator shaft. Therefore, I began working on removing the floor. I lifted a panel, pushed aside a tangle of cables, and reached into the empty space. The shaft stretched dozens of meters downward, its walls faintly illuminated by emergency red lighting. The usual hum of the ship's engine suddenly ceased. The outage seemed more serious than initially thought. I descended into the narrow space, clutching the elevator's safety rope. Swinging over it to the left side of the shaft, I managed some acrobatics to grab onto a ladder. Relief washed over me as I set my foot on another rung. It would be absurdly foolish to plummet to the ground now. Descending several meters down the ladder, I soon came upon a service hatch. I slid the cover aside and squeezed in. I knew the ship's layout well. Just 10 meters to go, open the connecting corridor, and climb 5 floors up the ladder. A right turn and I would be on the main corridor leading to the command deck. My thoughts were interrupted by a strange sound. From somewhere in the distance, a soft yet piercing cry of a child echoed, an unusual and unsettling noise emanating from the depths of the damaged decks. I listened intently, trying to pinpoint its source. My heart beat in a frantic rhythm, contrasting with the oppressive silence that followed the explosion. It was a rhythmic, almost hypnotic pulsation, stark against the sudden absence of sound that engulfed the ship. Quickly returning to the elevator shaft, I continued downward, guided by the child's cry. Descending 2 decks lower, the crying became much more distinct. In the corridor on the 6th deck, I finally found the tiny creature. A small, lost being, writhing in convulsive tears in a corner. Upon seeing me, it immediately fell silent. Its eyes, full of fear and sadness, pleaded with me. I examined it quickly. It seemed uninjured, dressed in a clean blue blouse and dark trousers, slightly worn at the knees. Where did you escape from? I wondered, trying in vain to recall any crew members who might bring a child about 1.5 years old on board. Navigating the connecting corridor, just 90 centimeters high, with the toddler was challenging. I crawled forward on all fours, pushing the child ahead of me. It didn't like that much, so it was no surprise when it began crying again. After a while, I felt a hatch on the ceiling of the connecting corridor, which bisected the ship. Just climb up to the bridge now, I thought with necessary sarcasm. The boy, I discovered during a quick medical check, had thankfully fallen asleep from exhaustion and stopped wriggling. I could thus hold him with one hand while attempting to climb the ladder with the other. It soon became apparent that climbing like this was impossible without acrobatic skills. I kept losing balance and tipping backward. So, I descended to the mezzanine platform, where a ladder led up through the ship, and laid the sleeping child on the cold metal floor. Removing my jumpsuit, I wrapped it around the little being, creating a rudimentary carrier. I tied the sleeves around my neck and the trouser legs around my waist. The child slept peacefully on my stomach. I hope no one sees me like this, I thought. I tried to cover my unruly breasts with the makeshift carrier, with little success. Deciding to ignore any stray glances and welcome any crew member I might encounter with a wide smile, I remembered my ex-partner's words when I refused to attend nudist parties. Let them look if they don't have it at home, he used to say. The new tactic with the carrier on my stomach worked. 6 more floors to the bridge, one already behind me. I rested briefly and moved on. In the next mezzanine, I caught my breath and tried the intercom again, only to be met with chilling silence. With no choice but to continue alone, I inched forward. Each step echoed silently against the metal rungs of the ladder. Approaching the bridge, another explosion, even stronger than the first, rocked the entire ship and plunged it into darkness. The comforting red emergency lights were gone, leaving only pitch-black void ahead. For a moment, it seemed as if the entire universe held its breath. My heart skipped a beat in my chest. Blindly, relying solely on touch, I continued. Feeling the last rung that would lead me to the bridge, I squeezed through with the child into a low horizontal corridor. Crawling on all fours, the child like a backpack beneath me, I quickly encountered a metal grate. Relief flooded me. This was a sure sign I was at the ship's corridor leading to the bridge. I pushed the metal closure, which crashed to the ground, and crawled out into the corridor. Finally standing, I feverishly swept my hands across the wall at chest level. There had to be an emergency equipment box somewhere. Soon enough, I found it. Wrestling with the opening mechanism for a while, the box's doors eventually gave into my fingers and snapped open. I threw the contents onto the ground. At the back of the box, I found what I had come for, a pocket flashlight. The beam of the flashlight immediately made me feel safer. As far as I could see, the corridor was utterly empty, as if all life had vanished from the ship. I laid the child on the ground and disassembled the makeshift carrier. With satisfaction, I squeezed back into the tight jumpsuit and zipped it up to my neck. Upon reaching the bridge's doors, I discovered they were locked. Returning to the box, I quickly sorted through the contents I had scattered and found a laser cutter. I mentally thanked all the smart people who anticipated that even something as mundane and durable as a door opener could fail. Sparks flying around, I slowly but surely cut through the otherwise resistant magnesium-titanium alloy doors. I decided to carve a circular opening to easily squeeze through. Once the door material surrendered to the laser's destruction, I kicked its section into the bridge. I tumbled inside and immediately gasped for breath.